Have you ever found yourself sitting at the piano, practicing away aimlessly, and thinking to yourself,
what am I doing?
well, that's actually a pretty normal thing, especially if you're a beginner and you're not really sure what to do or how to structure your practice. Well, today you're in luck because in this video, we're going to talk about what I think is the perfect daily practice routine if you're a beginner pianist. And besides, piano playing should be a lot of fun and stress-free. And if you've got the structure in place, then it's gonna be a lot more enjoyable. Hey there, it's Josh with Piano Frenzy, and I'm glad you're here for today's video because we're talking about something super important. A daily practice routine for the piano that makes sure that you get everything you need, develop the way you want, and get the best results every single time. By the way, if you're new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe. That way you don't miss an update. So when you're first getting started with the piano, developing a practice routine can be a little tricky. Besides, you're trying to figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, where you need to develop, and ultimately what you need to do. However, I've taught thousands of piano lessons at this point, and I'm pretty sure I have it figured out. I think. So, what does a good daily practice routine look like? Well, in my experience, it involves having a period for warm-ups, usually 5 to 10 minutes, a period for sight reading or playing new music you've never seen before, at least 5 to 10 minutes for that, and then a period for actually working on the problem areas and the pieces that you're working on, and then a period at the end for you to have some fun, play your pieces through, play other fun music and just new things you haven't tried before, and just enjoying the experience. On the contrary, a bad practice routine looks like somebody that's just playing scales for hours, or somebody that is just playing their pieces top to bottom over and over again and not really fixing the problem. That's a bad practice routine. Bad practice routines can also be somebody who is just sitting at the piano for a few minutes, playing it and just saying, hey, I think I'm good, when actually they're not, and they're not really fixing the problems that are present in their music. So with that said, I'm now going to show you my daily practice routine that I encourage all beginner pianists to start with. I think it's the perfect daily practice routine and something that you should start implementing right away. So let's start with warm-ups. Now in my warm-ups, it can include a variety of technical skills and things that you're trying to develop with your fingers. So in this case, they're gonna involve some scales, they're gonna involve some chords and harmonies, and other things like that. Let's start with the 5-finger pattern. So the first exercise is the 5-finger pentascale. I like to start with my right hand, finger 1 on C. You're just gonna play 5 notes. Left hand does the same thing, starting with the pinky. Now the purpose of the exercise is to get your hands playing together early and in a simple way. So I just do up like this, and then down. Scoot up the key, do it again. Then up. Then up. And etc. Now the exercise will continue all the way up to the next C, so you'll finish here. And that's it. So as you can see, 5-finger patterns are a very easy way to get involved with the piano without having to think too much. It's just all 5 fingers going up and down. You get to work on many things, right? The evenness of your fingers, the accuracy of your notes, and your tone production. And that's why I like starting with that. After the 5-finger pattern, I like to make sure I go over what we call contrary motion scales. I choose these because 1-octave scales are a little more complex, especially when you're doing them in parallel motion, which has both hands going the same way. Contrary is a bit different, so let's take a look at that. So when I'm doing the contrary scale, I'm using the same fingers for both hands, so it'll look like this. So the fingering is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's the same for both hands. The reason I choose this is because a 1-octave scale will have different fingers. For example, if I did a parallel motion scale, the fingers would be different. And that's kind of complicated for a beginner to get into and a little unnecessary right now. The point is to warm your hands up and get them moving fluidly in the most simplest way possible. So when you're feeling a little bit more advanced, you can actually expand this into 2 octaves, which means the fingers would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you just repeat it as much as you want until you're ready to end your octave. So here's 2 octaves, for example. Now it's important when you start this scale that you start it on the same C and not on opposite Cs. That just makes things a little bit more complicated. And this just keeps the fingers right in front of you. You can see everything that's happening, and then you can just make sure that your motion is the same, your wrist is fluid. So as I showed in the video, the beauty of contrary motion scales is that you can use the same fingering for both hands, even though the hands are going opposite directions. It's just a nice way to start learning your scales, and I encourage you to go ahead and start with the C scale like we did, but then start expanding into the D major scale, the G major scale, and so forth until you've covered them all. Another warm-up I like to do as well involves playing chords. Now, this is not quite what you think, so let's hop over to the piano so I can show you what I mean. Now, chords are just simply what we did with our arpeggios, except they're all at the same time, or blocked as we refer to them. So I will just try to play as many C chords as I can, starting at the bottom of the piano all the way to the top, and I will cross my hands in the process to make it more engaging. So we'll start with left hand down here. We'll go left hand, then right, then left, down and cross over this way. And you can do this on several chords. So for example, for the first day of practice, maybe you only do C chords. Then the next day, maybe you'll do, I don't know, F chords. Or maybe the next day G chords and so forth, right? It's important that when you practice the chords, you practice them slowly, and I understand that sometimes chords may not be comfortable if you're new to the piano, getting that middle finger to play. So what you can do to first start your practice with this is just use finger 1 and 5 in both hands. It has the same effect, it's just not going to sound as full. Versus I encourage you to maybe start your chords open first before adding that third finger, and then when you're comfortable, add that third finger and see if you can play all the notes at the same time. Now, chords might seem like the most difficult of the exercises to do, especially if you don't have great finger dexterity yet, and you might have some issues putting down all 3 keys at the same time. If that's the case, you can just start by playing fifths, which means fingers 1 and 5 for both hands, and then when you're comfortable, start adding that third finger in. That way you can at least get the motions in before you can form full chords. The other warm-up I love to do, and if you've seen this channel before, then you know this already, but it involves playing arpeggios. For this example, I like to do arpeggios split between both hands rather than all in one hand. I'll show you what I mean by that. If I started on C in both hands, then I just do the first 3 notes here, and the next 3 notes here. And then you just repeat it. Now, if you want to make it more exciting, you can change between different key areas. So one progression I like to use is the C, E, G, the F, A, C, the G, B, D, and then back to the C, E, G. And so it sounds just like this. So arpeggios are just a beautiful way to play the piano, train your ear, listen to different harmonies, and it also gets you moving around the keys a little bit in a simpler way than scales because you only need the 3 fingers, right? 1, 3, and 5 for both hands. And it's just a nice way to warm your hands up and also just get your ear trained. Now, the last technical warm-up I like to do involves articulations, which means either playing notes legato or smooth, or staccato and short and bouncy. Now, there is no particular warm-up that you should do these with. You can use any of the examples we already talked about. So for example, I'll show you how we can play the 5-finger pentascale with 2 different types of articulations. One is legato or smooth, the other will be staccato. So we have 2 types of main articulations on the piano. We have legato, right? And then we've got staccato where we bounce the keys. I think it's important that you have good skill in both because you're going to see those in all the pieces you play. And so one way to at least work this out in your warm-ups is to do this with your pentascales or any of the other methods that we already talked about. So for the pentascales, I will start like this. I will do legato once, then staccato. So at this point, you've discovered that warm-ups are actually a very important part of the routine. And you can use any one that you want. You can rotate them, you can do some of them one day, some of them the other day, or you can do them all in one day. But ultimately, don't make it a huge part of your practice. I suggest maybe making 5 to 15 minutes of your practice just for warm-ups. And as far as choosing which warm-ups you want to do, make sure that you implement whatever's in your pieces into your warm-ups. So for example, if you have a piece that has a ton of staccatos, or a piece that is just full of legato sections or arpeggios, then you want to make sure you do more of those warm-ups before you start your main pieces. Now, before moving on to the main pieces, we need to make sure that we go over some sight reading, or just pulling out a random piece of music maybe 4 to 8 measures, and seeing how well you can do playing it. Now, I like to make sure I do my sight reading in a more exciting way, so what I like to do is set myself on a timer. It's usually a short timer, anywhere from 45 seconds to 1 minute. As the timer is going on, I am phantom playing the notes on the keyboard, not actually making any sound, but just kind of feeling my way through. I'm reading through and I'm checking out the key signature. I'm looking at how many different rhythms I have, and I'm doing everything I can in that short period. Then when the timer goes off, it's time to play. Sight reading doesn't have to be a major part of your practice routine, but it needs to be there every day. The purpose of sight reading is just to make sure that you can process something that you haven't seen before and to see how quickly you can do it. If you do it every day, you'll start to notice that your skills develop for it pretty quickly over time, and that as you start reading new music, things that you're working seriously on, you'll learn them a lot faster. So my advice to you is take maybe 5 minutes a day sight reading, and sight read several passages every day to make sure that you're making the best use of your time. So at this point, half of your practice session is over. You've done the warm-ups, you've done the sight reading. Now it's time to get into your actual music and figuring things out. So my number one suggestion when you're learning new music or you're working on something is to not start at the beginning and read it top to bottom. That's actually a huge mistake. Instead, what you want to make sure that you do is work on the problem areas. So for example, let's say it's a Beethoven sonata and you're having issues in the middle of it. You should probably start in the middle and work those couple of measures out. And then when you feel pretty good about that, then you can start working on other areas or maybe reading music from top to bottom. Now, if you decide just to read your music top to bottom and then you leave very little time to work on the actual problem areas, what you'll start to notice is that, yeah, you can play the piece, but anytime you get to that one spot, you're always gonna have hiccups or massive slowdowns, or you might just mess it up because it hasn't gotten the proper attention yet. In this case, I like to have my students use a practice journal because what they can do with this is actually write down the areas that are struggling or the parts that they've worked on the most or the least, and then that way when they sit down and practice, they don't just forget what they're supposed to do. There needs to be some sort of structure to it. So last but not least, we're at the end of the practice session, and the last part that you can do is either play your pieces top to bottom to see how things went, or you can just play lots of other fun music, things that you've wanted to try out, things that are not part of your normal core music. And I think it's important to always branch out, have fun, and try new pieces of music and new things, because sometimes practice can get very draining if you just kind of stay in the same music the whole time. Besides, at this point, your hands will be nice and warm, which means they'll be moving fluidly, and playing all your repertoire is going to feel really easy. Also, if you just started with this, your mind might not be processing notes quickly enough because you haven't read anything yet. And so that's why it's important to have the warm-ups and the sight reading before you read your main music. That way you're nice and prepped and you're ready to go when it's time to really concentrate. And there you have it. That's a basic daily practice routine that I think all beginners should do. As you can see, a practice routine doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to be well structured, and it needs to make sense for where you are as a pianist right now. However, when you follow this routine, you can say, I did this, I did my warm-ups, I did my sight reading, I worked on the problem areas of my piece, and I had a little bit of fun, and I played some stuff that I just wanted to try out. And by following a structured practice routine like this, you'll feel a lot more accomplished at the end of the practice session. And if you're keeping track of your practice in a journal, you'll be able to look at a series of practice sessions over time and really see just how far you've come. And I think that is gonna make your practice routines that much sweeter. So I hope you found the video helpful. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.